What's up, guys? You're listening to another episode of Selling on Amazon with Andy Isom. Guys, I am excited. I have two special guests with me today, all the way from the UK. I have Kat and Laura from the brand Dawdle. It's a dawdle. I learned today has to do with, if you're in the UK, you probably know that. I probably butchered that, but it has to do with making things easy. So they're here building their brand to make things easy for parents and kids. Kat and Laura, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
No worries.
Can you guys give us just a quick background of yourselves? I know that you're both mothers, you both have kids. So obviously trying to start a business with other responsibilities, especially children. I have two of my own. I have a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old son. A lot of you guys know that. But the challenges of starting a business around those responsibilities can be pretty daunting. So for both of you, what kind of motivated you to start this brand back in 2016?
Yeah, so I was a recycling officer full-time for a local council. And then I had 3 kids very close together. So when my daughter was 15 months old, my twins were born. And I used to find mealtimes super challenging, really stressful. And it was by chance when we were on holiday that my daughter accidentally broke the handle off her fork, and she proceeded to pick up the short stubby end and then eat her food much more easily. And that gave me the idea that actually it's not our kids that are the problem, but actually the tools we're giving them. And maybe if we gave them something much more suitable to their age, their coordination, their strength, that they might be able to be more successful and therefore make mealtimes easier. So that's sort of a background as to how it came about, really.
I sort of set the business up and did all the really difficult groundwork of getting all the research and testing done with experts and all the manufacturing set up. And then in around 2017, was really ready to sort of take it out properly to market. That's when I joined the business. So I worked in some of the investment banks in London and working in marketing. So I joined Kat and we started to build the business out from that point, really. And your family were a big part of it as well, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the early stages, was it just the two of you kind of getting the brand off the ground, or did you guys utilize a lot of other help? I know you kind of were mentioning family members. Were there a lot of other people involved, or mainly just the two of you?
So in the very early stages, I'd say it was my immediate family, so my parents and my sister. But we did draw on, because it was a pure startup, we drew on a lot of other resources. So government organisations, support groups, basically any and everything we could get our hands on in terms of either funding or mentoring or support. So yeah, there was quite a big, wide network
Throughout the whole experience to this point.
How important do you think that was, starting with, help right from the beginning? Just to give some context, there's a lot of listeners of my podcast who may be going at this alone, where they don't have a business partner, or for whatever reason, their friends or family don't really want to be involved. And so they're kind of doing all of the initial startup part of, figuring out their products, sourcing all that alone. How big of an impact do you think having help plays in the long-term success?
Yeah, it's massive, really, because you've got to recognise what your weaknesses are. You're going to have strengths, but you're going to have weaknesses. And in a business like this, you have to pull on all different areas and expertise. So I've definitely got my strengths. Laura, say, background in marketing, her strengths. So everybody brings a strength to the business. And if you're doing it on your own, one, it's quite a lonely place to be. 2, it's really hard. As part of the process, you need to bounce ideas off people. There's so many decisions to make. And if it's just you making those decisions, you're always trying to second guess yourself. So having another perspective, I think, is really important. And also, as I say, that different sort of skill, background, expertise people can bring to the conversation is super important.
I think we talk quite a lot about the early days for Kat, when it was just her trying to do this with the young children all around her feet, trying to organise absolutely everything from scratch with no real background or experience in it.
And that was a massive slog. And I think for people that are doing it on their own, I think you would say that the difference of doing it with people and with support versus how it was in those early days is quite significant, isn't it?
Yeah. It's what type of support, because you've got to recognise in the early days there is no revenue. You know, say it took me 2 years to design, develop this product and bring it to market. So it takes time to build that revenue stream. So also finding somebody that, you know, business partner is great because you're both fully invested, but you're both accepting that there's not necessarily an initial return, you know, from the outset.
I want to go a little bit deeper on that because this is something I think a lot of people struggle with to understand, especially people who don't have a background in business or online business, is understanding that it can take time to generate revenue and then ultimately generate profit. How are you guys able to kind of manage those expectations for revenue or profit early on? I know you mentioned it can take a couple years to, you know, get through the process of product development, sourcing, testing, launching. And for some people, you know, maybe they don't have years, or maybe their expectation is, you know, I'm going to launch this e-commerce brand and start making money next month, start making profit, start paying my bills and quit my full-time job. How were you guys able from the beginning to manage the expectations of, hey, this might take a year, 2 years before this can become, you know, your full-time thing?
Well, there are options. So we went the more organic route. So at the point I started it, there was not the pressure or expectation on me to work because I had 3 young children. The cost of putting them into nursery probably would have been higher than me working. So we sort of had an agreement, myself and my husband, that, you know, by the time they went to school, I would be back out working. And at that point, I had the sort of 3-year window, if you like, therefore to make it work. But if that's not to say that's the only route, because if you need, you know, if you're the main breadwinner and you need to be making income, I guess you've got 2 options. You're either running it alongside a job, which is also going to be pretty stressful, but the other option is investment. And you've got to be prepared to give away sort of a bigger chunk because you're very early stage investment. So obviously they're going to want a much bigger piece of the pie. But there is potentially then the option to sort of speed up that process and potentially be on a salary much quicker.
Yeah, and I think we have 2 different experiences, because my experience of joining the business to a point where I could afford to pay a
Salary was doing 2 jobs. So keeping my job and working that and then doing job at the same time. But then it does get to a point where you have to make a choice because you can't do both. Either then your career is going to suffer because you can't give that focus, or your new potential opportunity is going to suffer because you can't give the other focus. And I guess it also depends on the role you take in the business. So mine is sort of slightly more flexible in the marketing brand side of things, work, you know, at all times, different places, you know, Kat, with all the kind of running the business and all the rigor and responsibility that comes with it, it's much harder to do sort of two roles. And if you're doing all of those roles yourself, then yeah, it's just really, really very difficult.
Going off kind of the investment funding question, because this is another question that comes up a lot all the time from students or listeners of the podcast, is kind of knowing when is the right time to bring on investment. So just to give a little context for you guys, my wife and I, with our business partners and good friends, we started Remy and Rue with our own, you know, finances bootstrapped. I was working a full-time job. My business partners were working, like we were all working. My wife was working. So this was kind of like our side project, right? So we were just funding it through our full-time job, kind of doing like what you were saying, Laura, and you know, kind of balancing both of those in the early stages. But we did reach that tipping point for our brand where we realized we need cash to scale. Like we need investment. And so we've done a bunch of different forms of investments over the years, where we've taken investments from family members, and then we've done a business line of credits. We've done business credit cards, like, you know, all those types of things. But a lot of people are unsure of when is the right time for them. And obviously this is an individual answer, but I'm curious what your perspective is on this. And maybe like Kat, what you were saying, maybe it does kind of go with Are you the main breadwinner? How invested emotionally and mentally are you in making this work? So maybe it is going out and getting a big investor just to start and taking a salary from the investor, or bootstrapping, and then you reach a certain point where it's like, hey, I need to order more inventory. I don't have the cash flow to do that. I need outside investment. What would you guys say, or what would you recommend if someone came to you, you know, kind of getting started or wanting to get started with a business, knowing like, hey, when should I consider an outside investment?
I think it depends a little bit on what you want the investment for, because if you need the investment, if you have to have it in order because you know, like you say, you need it for a salary, or you need it because you can't progress any further, that's then going to be driven by the need. So you're going to have to do that. That's taken out of your hands to an extent. I think from our perspective, we've always, when we've looked at investment, we've always looked at it when there's opportunity. So we don't need it, because obviously for an investor, you desperately needing money to do something to keep the business afloat is quite a different proposition to coming to them to say, hey, we're fine, we don't need money, we want money to take it from here to here, and these are the opportunities that we have in front of us. So whenever we have really fantastic opportunities in front of us, be that entering a market or going with a big retailer or launching a new product, those are the things that we can package together to build a proposition to an investor that makes the business so much more attractive than being slightly desperate for investment. You know, getting investment is such, like, the reasons why people get it are always going to be different. But I think for us, that's always been the sort of ideal scenario.
Yeah, and it can be quite personal in terms to the individual. Some individuals are very happy to take on risk. Others, you know, it can affect them quite significantly. So that is another consideration, that actually, if you're quite comfortable taking on debt and that doesn't give you sleepless nights, then that's probably more of an option. But if you're someone who feels uncomfortable, you know, really starts to impact other areas of your life because you're taking on potentially too much debt or significant debt, then that is another consideration as to say how you manage that as an individual.
And I think the other side of it as well is what type of investment, because you know, if you're somebody who's set this business up with an absolute burning desire to run your own business, then you don't necessarily want to have somebody who wants to be fully involved in your business, help, you know, with you making decisions with them, and them being, you know, needing updates all the time and wanting feedback all the time. You just necessarily, you know, you might just want the cash. Other businesses, you know, they feel like they haven't got all the expertise that they need, so they're looking for investment that will help them to actually add not just the cash, but also an element of expertise or networks or something else to go with it. So, yeah.
That's a really, really good point. And people have asked me too, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way on this. People have asked me about working with a business partner, and they say, you know, would you do it again with your business partners? And I say, absolutely. With the business partners we have, absolutely. If I were to go back and do it again, I would have done it with them, because of kind of what you were mentioning, Laura, of they brought, not only did they bring an investment, like we both brought 50-50 investment to the table, which made it easier. So kind of like what Kat was saying, it also depends on your risk tolerance. So if it's like, hey, I'm not willing, or, you know, I'm not as comfortable, maybe not willing, but not as comfortable putting $20,000, $30,000 myself into this, you find a business partner. Now it's like, oh, 10, 15, like, yeah, that won't crush me, right? So you feel more comfortable, but also the expertise of like our friends, our business partners, their skill set is very complementary to my skill set and my wife's skill set. So it's a really, really good, you know, working partnership of we all bring some different skill sets to the table, which adds value to where, like, for example, my business partner, Cameron, he's a fantastic photographer. He does commercial photography and videography as like, that's like his full-time thing, what he does. And so he brought that whole element skill set to our brand, to where now like we don't have to hire product photographers and content creators because we now have that. And then my skill set, I came from a background of business, from sourcing, from marketing, online business, advertising, that kind of stuff. So I came with that skill set. So we complemented each other really well, and it worked for a good working partnership. Now, for you guys, you know, based in the UK, I know that, you know, the UK can have some tough challenges, not just from an Amazon perspective, but maybe from some other just market conditions and things like that in the UK. I have a lot of listeners who listen from the UK, and I've had some students from the UK that I've mentored over the years. And by far, the number one question that comes up, and I think this will relate to a lot of the US listeners as well, who want to know, should I expand to the UK? So you can provide maybe some insight on that as well. But What are your thoughts on, because we talk a lot about Amazon on this podcast, but selling on Amazon in the Amazon US marketplace and Amazon UK marketplace. What are your thoughts on launching, if you're a UK resident, launching on the UK first, then expanding to the US, or launching just directly in the US maybe and the UK? What are your thoughts on that, having maybe a deeper understanding?
So when very first started, it wasn't my intention to sell on Amazon, and my concern being that might put off then taking on sort of bricks and mortar store key retailers. But I think it quickly became apparent that actually needed to be on Amazon. So we had been selling on Amazon UK for a long time. And the challenge as we started on UK, and I think the key was doing the brand building work as well. So just being, when I first went on Amazon, actually didn't have any PPC running, literally just put the listing on and assumed people would just buy it, which they didn't in their, droves, because there was no marketing behind it. So we started to do the marketing, more shows, build awareness, sales were increasing, we had some PPC running, and we were starting to see some build. And then fairly quickly, I suppose, we started to turn our attention to further marketplaces like Europe. And Amazon had this sort of great program, Pan EU, where you could basically just sell across Europe. You would have to VAT register across multiple territories, but then the world was sort of your oyster. And that ultimately became a real problem for us because there was just not, it was costly, there was not enough control, rather than really cracking sort of one marketplace and then moving on to another, being able to support it with the same sort of process we've been through the UK with the marketing, etc. It was making selling across these other marketplaces really challenging and really expensive. So that was probably a big lesson learned, and that sort of journey or process happened over a number of years. So where we are today, we've massively sort of pulled back with the intention, and our infrastructure is much better, with the intention of sort of being much more focused in terms of, walking before we try running, focused. UK, we're well established, we're sort of the bestseller and have been for some time. But if we turn our attention, for example, to Germany, then really focusing more on Germany, getting the support behind it, making it work. But yes, our key marketplaces for Amazon are UK, Germany, France, and the States. And the States has been rumbling along for quite a long time, actually, because that was another one we quite quickly tried to move on to, having done some initial work with a partner in the US. And that's been really challenging because, again, for the same reason that we haven't got that network around, brand awareness to make it really work. So US is on our hit list, but we still mindful that we need to be, have the investment, have the plan, everything sitting around sort of building US sales rather than sort of going on and hoping for the best.
I think one of the things about it is how we view it, because whilst Amazon as a platform is Amazon and everybody kind of goes, well, it's one business, it's one platform, people that buy from that platform are very different. So even though all of our products ultimately solve the same problem for parents, and the experience that they have, it's really high quality, the 5-star reviews, we get that from all over the world. But the reasons why people care about this product are quite different, and why they would buy it and how they would respond to marketing is very different. To Germany and the US, to UK, to Asia, there's different reasons, there's different pain points we're solving, there's different price points we have to consider, there's different perceptions, reputations, etc., competitiveness in the market. So I think slightly naively, as Kat said, we sort of launched it on Amazon going, well, it's on Amazon in all these countries now, woohoo! And actually, we should have done it in the same way that you would do anything when you launch into a new country. You have to have the infrastructure, the marketing, you have to understand the customer, you have to understand the reason why they would buy that product, you have to understand the competitors. It's not a quick win to just suddenly put it on there and think it's going to sell, because it won't. And that then draws you into having SKUs in wrong places, costing you money in warehouses. It can really start to, erode what you've been trying to actually achieve, because you're just stretching yourself in so many different directions.
You can quite quickly lose money on Amazon. So, if you, with the merchant fees, the PPC, it can be very quick and easy to find yourself actually negative net profit, because all those costs are too high, but you're sort of chasing sales and chasing revenue. So we find Amazon a bit of a necessary evil in that, you've got to, it's a big marketplace, you need to be on there, but it is very challenging to be on that marketplace and sell on that marketplace, control your costs. There's so many, and Amazon, personally, we've always found it quite challenging to deal with. It's definitely, in our opinion, set up for the buyer, not the seller.
Yeah, we definitely, as a business, we get frustrated every single day, probably, with something Amazon related as a business, and then we go home and we spend money as customers going, Amazon's great because I can get this returned and I can get that and I can buy it all in one go and I love Amazon, and then next day come in and go, oh, Amazon, it's so frustrating. So it's such a different experience being a retailer with Amazon.
Oh, that's so funny because I talk about this all the time with people. Even friends too. They're like, oh yeah, like selling on Amazon, it must be like so nice. I'm like, wait till you have to deal with Amazon seller support. Like, it's so funny because yeah, as a shopper, customer, right? It's like, oh, Amazon's awesome. I buy anything, I need a return. Like, it is like the best shopping experience. But on the back end, as a seller, like trying to get support sometimes is like pulling your hair out trying to get someone to help you fix a problem at Amazon. So I totally get that frustration. And I like what you said there about, I know both of you kind of touch on this and I kind of want to reiterate it here just really quickly, of it's almost like spreading yourself a little bit too thin, right? Because you guys both made a really good point. On every Amazon marketplace, you have to respect it as its own marketplace. You can't just think, oh, Amazon, it's the same everywhere. Like, no, people, like you said, they react differently, behave differently, prices, buying, all that stuff is different in all the different countries and marketplaces. I like to play the game Risk. In high school, I used to play that all the time. It's a board game and there's, it's a map of the world. Oh yeah, you're familiar. Yeah. Map of the world. You put the little pieces and you have to strategically like place your pieces in order to, capture other countries and overtake the globe. That's the whole point. And I kind of think about the game of Risk and the game of Amazon. It's almost like if you spread your little pieces too thin everywhere, like, oh, I'm going to sell in all the different Amazon marketplaces, then you're spreading your finances, you're spreading your inventory, you're spreading, like everything gets spread a little bit too thin, even your focus, to where you can't really defend. Like if you getting attacked from all these different areas, it's like, I only got 3 little soldiers on every little country. It's going to be really hard to win that way, versus at least my strategy in the game of Risk is you find your strongest places on the map. Like, all right, here's where I got a nice collection of troops. You build up a really good foundation there. And then with that nice big army, you're able to, go against your competitors and kind of grow from there. So that's kind of the way that I like to think about Amazon too, is think about where is your strongest, like on the map when you start the game. For you, it might be the UK. It might be the US, it might be Australia. I have students in Australia, right? Figure out where your stronghold is, start there, and then expand from that, but don't try to spread yourself too thin. Okay, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to end with maybe one piece of advice. And I want to focus this advice maybe on parents, because I think you both bring this really good perspective, having kids, because for people out there who have kids, that they can take a lot of your time. For someone out there that may be listening to this episode, whether it's a mother or father, someone who has a family, has kids, and they're trying to find that balance of how do I do this with having kids or trying to take care of my kids, what advice would you give to them to balance those responsibilities?
I think actually it's a bit of what I would say is it's a bit of what we just talked about. It's not trying to stretch yourself too thinly. So, if you have other responsibilities outside of your business, you have to be realistic about what you can achieve, and you have to achieve it really, really well. And then incrementally, you will grow and you will get there. If you try and take on too much, which is it's a really hard balance. One of the biggest challenges that we face always as a business, and it's a good thing to have, but is there's so much opportunity for us. There are so many places that we could be and we could sell and we could grow into. But the reality is we have a certain amount of set hours that we can work to because we have other responsibilities. So we have to make sure we pick the best opportunities for the business that will help us grow and get to where we want to be, but do it really, really well. And then that helps a little bit to keep that focus on the business, but enabling you to try and balance that with your responsibilities outside of work?
There's no doubt, as you become more established, I think it's easy to get a better work-life balance. But I would say there's no right or wrong. Back in the early days, I would beat myself up a lot because I felt that I was sort of neglecting or ignoring the kids. You know, I'd be in the bedroom where my little desk was set up, and I would be trying to finish an email, and the kids would be coming up being like, "Oh, mummy," and I'd be like, "Oh, just wait a minute," and sort of batting them off. And then I would have guilt in terms of, actually, I'm not being the best mum, you know, I'm not giving them the attention they need. But there's always sort of yin and yang, and actually I think the effect of that is that my kids are typically, you know, quite independent, quite strong-willed, because actually they haven't had me all the time and me there sort of to their every need and whim. So I would say there's no right or wrong, and you just got to, if you're doing your best, and if you're trying to juggle family, kids, everything, then try not to beat yourself up too much about it.
I like that. Yeah, just do your best. Don't beat yourself up. You know, try to set those boundaries when you can. But thank you guys so much, Kat, Laura. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast today. Once again, guys, that's Dawdle. I know you guys have your website, dawdle.com. You can also find their products on Amazon. So especially those of you, I know we've got a lot of parents out there listening. Parents with kids, if you guys want to make mealtime more enjoyable, go check out Dawdle, check out their products. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If you guys enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would take just a second to leave a review, tap some stars, or write something if you want. It helps me out a ton. It helps the podcast reach more people and inspire more people to get their brands or businesses started. Once again, guys, I'm Andy. You're listening to Selling on Amazon with Andy Isom. We'll see you in the next episode.